back, sports fans. Today I would like to show you a new gadget that I have created for the van that I'm very excited about. Let me explain the problem that motivated the development of this. I bought this monster combination refrigerator freezer. It's a 65-liter Iceco. And I would very much like to nest this thing under my kitchen pod, but as you can see, the kitchen pod is hopelessly out of its weight class here. So the obvious thing to do then is probably take the kitchen pod apart and rebuild it to make it larger. Now, for various reasons, I don't want a huge kitchen pod like that against that wall. I have seen online pictures of a lot of van conversions where they place their kitchen near the sliding door. To show that this is feasible, I positioned the fridge here. I left enough space in that corner for the gray water jug. And then I positioned the fridge next to it, and this is the outline of how much space it would take up. There is still plenty of space over here to enter and exit the van. So the question then becomes, if I want to put my kitchen pot over here, what can I anchor it to? Well, about the only thing available is this corner of the 80/20 cabinet, and I feel that if I were to only anchor the kitchen pod there, it'd be this huge long moment arm that's going to be twisting back and forth as you drive, and eventually it's going to lead to metal fatigue and bad things will happen. So I want to be able to anchor it somewhere else as well. Well, the obvious thing to think about is, how could I anchor something into these holes where the jump seat would normally go? Every one of these holes, as you're probably familiar with, let's take a look at this one right here, has a square 9/16 inch steel bar that's wrapped around the track. I have machined this horseshoe, which is basically like a U-bolt, except it's a U-nut. It's got a pair of M8 threaded holes here. They're threaded all the way through to the back side. It is machined to fit precisely around this this bar here. Let's look at some of the ways that this could be used to attach things to the floor. All right, well, here's about the simplest way you could attach something to the floor using the horseshoe clamp. Remember, underneath the floor is something shaped like this with a pair of holes, M8 holes, that are 40 millimeters apart. I'm using a couple of 25 millimeter M8s because 25 millimeters is the entire depth of this, and I want to engage as many threads as I can so that you're less likely to be able to strip the aluminum threads. Now, when you start to get tighter, you have to alternate tightening the two bolts, because otherwise you'll end up with this being slightly askew. I mean, it's as tight a fit as I can make it without causing problems where, you know, it might fit on some bars and not on others. So you just have to make sure to go slow and tighten evenly, just like if you were tightening a bicycle stem, for example. Now, once you've done that, that thing is secure. You could, of course, also mount it on the other side here. So using simple clamps like this, you could mount to either directly to the right or directly to the left of the channel. If you wanted to mount directly over the channel, well, there's an alternative for that as well. Now, the previous technique didn't require anything except an Allen wrench. For this technique, if you want to mount directly over the channel, you're going to have to drill some holes in the profile. Now, that's not the hard part. The hard part is you also have to relieve the wings in the profile so that the bolt head will fit through. And that is, I don't think, possible to do with a hand drill. you would need a drill press at a minimum to do something like that. 80/20 has a machining service where they can put holes like this in the end of your profile. I'm not sure if they allow you to specify exactly where the holes go or not, or if they just have a standard offset from the end. In this case, I've made 2 holes. They're 40 millimeters apart, which is the standard, size for all 80/20, 40/40 extrusions. It's the offset between the 2 holes in the horseshoe clamp. So, and of course I'm using much longer bolts now. I think these are 40 millimeter bolts. They might even be 45s. So you get this in position, and getting the first bolt started is always the hard part, but the first bolt will pull the clamp up towards you. Now I'm just tightening these sort of finger tight. But even like that, this is extremely stable. And it would be even more so if you span a pair of holes, because remember, they always come in pairs. And that's what I'm going to do down over there at that end of the van. I'm going to be running 80/20s across pairs of holes. So that is method number 2 for attachment. Requires a little bit of machining to do, probably a lot stronger than the alternative, and also it isn't just locking the profile down along one side where the profile can flex side to side. It's locking it straight down. And I just want to point out that if you're using the side L bracket attachment, you might want to use something like this, which this is the actual piece of hardware that came off of one of the Van Duit supplied bed platform supports. This would be a lot more sturdy than using a pair of these. And of course, since everything is machined to a 40 millimeter standard, it'll fit perfectly. Now here's method number 3 for attaching. In this case, I've rotated 90 degrees because I want my anchor piece to go across the van instead of down the length. And I've just used one bolt, one of the very long bolts, through one of the drilled holes in the 40/40, and then I've used a short bolt over here with this L bracket. Now again, this is going to require that you can drill a hole through the 40/40. Actually, now that I think about it, if you don't have a lot of specialized tools, you can radius these cutouts here with something like a Dremel rotary tool, because aluminum is very soft and it cuts very quickly. This is extremely stable, and if I tighten it just, that tight, it does not move. If it were attached across a pair of anchor holes in the floor, it would definitely not move. And in fact, that is how I am planning to build my kitchen pod. I am going to, you see I've pre-drilled the holes here to be the correct distance. And once I flip that down, I am going to attach a piece crossways here. And then I am going to attach a piece crossways here, because I want to run a much longer piece that way that I'm going to use to build a sliding platform for the fridge. Now, why don't I just build the sliding platform lower to the floor? I could, but the reason is I want to have a toe kick under my kitchen pod. And so I figured, well, no reason to build right against the floor. That's also the reason that this piece of 40/40 doesn't go all the way to the edge of the pod, because I want space for a toe kick along here that's going to be about the height of 2 of these. Now you might say to yourself, well, that's great, but I really, I can only use one bolt to attach. For some reason, I don't have space in my build for things like that. I don't have the machining ability to cut these holes. I want to attach one bolt here and one bolt here. What can I do? Or here's another possibility. I want to attach diagonally, right? I want to attach here and there, and obviously I'm only going to be able to hit one of the two bolt holes in each case. So what do I do? Well, I have a solution for that as well, and it's very tricky, and I'll demonstrate that next. If you remove one of the bolts so that you only have to attach with a single bolt, you'll find that this is going to wobble. And you could tighten this down some more, but I suspect what would happen is the clamp would try to twist around the square bar, and eventually the clamp would break. What's the solution? Well, the solution, and this is the world premiere of this because I actually had to take a break to wait for the Amazon person to get here to deliver this. So I'll be as surprised as you are to see it work. Get yourself an M8 set screw, sometimes called a grub screw or a headless screw. This one is 20 millimeters long. I'm starting to regret that. I feel like it may have been too short. Anyway, get that started in there. Now, my suspicion is that we'll take a 4 millimeter wrench. Yes. And now you drive this all the way into the floor. Okay, there, I've hit bottom. Yeah, if I did this again, I would definitely order longer bolts. There we are, that one's tight. This one's still going a ways. Now, think about why this works. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put an upward force on both sides of the clamp. Because the clamp is rigid, it doesn't matter whether you're pulling up with a bolt here or pushing up with a bolt underneath. Either way, it's still an upward force on this side of the clamp. So this, it won't be as secure as what we had before. I'm quite sure of that. But if you were attached here and to its partner track, I think this would be reasonable. It wouldn't be my first choice, but I think if you are absolutely, positively dead set against using more than one bolt hole, this is a way you can do that. Now here's another potential use for the set screw trick. What I've done in this case is I've put a set screw in both sides of the clamp. They're both pressing against the floor of the track, and the clamp is now rigidly part of this whole assembly. This allows me to put some kind of cover on here and bolt it to the clamp. What I've found is that if you use only the clamp and bolt something to it, there's just enough play in here, no matter how tightly you bolt it together, there's just enough play so that the plate rocks slightly on the floor. The set screws, however, eliminate the play. And if you now bolt into the tops of the holes, as long as your bolts aren't so long that they actually hit the set screws, and they won't because those set screws are way too far in there, then you end up with a pretty rigid cover plate for your seat track hold. This is 1/8 inch aluminum. If you tighten this enough, it'll actually bow and start to curl up at the edges. So you can't really crank down on this. And there you go. So that's another possible use for this. Obviously, you wouldn't use this kind of hardware for the top bolts. You'd use button heads or some kind of flat head. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've shown you at least 4 ways you can use the horseshoe clamp to bolt a piece of profile down to the floor. One way, which I believe is the preferred way, is 2 holes in the profile itself and mount it north-south on the axis of the van, the long axis of the van. A second way is to mount it north-south with an L bracket of some sort in the van. A third way is to mount it east-west with an L bracket. A fourth way is to mount it east-west without an L bracket. In fact, in any orientation without the L bracket, using a set screw on the opposite side. So I hope you found that interesting. I am excited to start building my new kitchen pod, and I'll post more when I get more done. Thanks for watching.